Hello. Today's short talk is about the news. You may have noticed that most of the news we see on the TV, hear on the radio, or read online or in a newspaper seems to be bad news, terrible events, depressing events, disasters, and such like. This raises the question then, why does the media concentrate on the bad things in life rather than the good things? Well, researchers at a Canadian university, McGill University, decided to investigate this matter. The researchers wondered whether journalists are more likely to report bad news because it is more interesting and easier to write about than good news, or whether readers, listeners and viewers have trained journalists over time to report the bad news. The two researchers were dissatisfied with previous research on this topic because participants in previous experiments were either not controlled or the experiments were not realistic. For example, people were placed into a lab where they knew their choices of news story would be monitored by the researchers. For these reasons, the researchers at McGill tried something new: deception, i.e., they tricked the participants into thinking they were doing a different kind of experiment. Let me explain what they did. They invited people to do a study of eye tracking. This type of study is often used when researching, for example, food brands in supermarkets to find out which products people's eyes are attracted to. They do this to help brands design packaging that attracts attention. So the participants were asked to look at a news website and select some news stories about politics to read, so the researchers could track how their eyes scanned the page. The results of the experiment were interesting. Most people were drawn towards the more depressing stories, the disasters, the scandals, the depressing news. However, when asked openly what type of news stories they preferred to read, most people claimed they liked to read good news stories. You know, the type, the cat rescued from a tree, woman gives birth to healthy quintuplets, that's 5 children, or gold medal winners at sporting events. They also usually reported that they thought the media focused too much on negative stories. Another result was that people who said they were interested in politics and current affairs were more likely to choose bad news stories to read. Let's think now about why this is the case. It's related to psychology and something that psychologists call negativity bias. You see, humans are hardwired to react to bad news because bad news may be a signal that there is a potential threat nearby. For example, thousands of years ago, when we lived in caves, if you heard news that someone had been killed and eaten by an animal, you would be more alert to the fact that a wild animal that is big enough to kill you is possibly in your area. Therefore, you need to be more careful when going about your daily business of hunting and gathering food. An up-to-date example, if you hear that there have been a series of burglaries in your area, you will be more likely to lock your doors and windows to protect your home. As you can see, we react to bad news because it's usually a potential threat to us. The Canadian researchers, however, offered an alternative explanation for these results. Let me explain that. Most people believe that their life is generally going quite well and that all of the bad things in life only happen to other people. Therefore, bad news is more surprising. If you're the type of person who only sees the bad and sees themselves as constantly unlucky, the glass half full type of person, then you might not be drawn so much to the bad news stories. You might even be drawn to the good news stories, because good news is more surprising to you. So that's the research there. If you'd like to read more about the topic, the authors of the study are Mark Trussler and Stuart Soroka. The article is called Consumer Demand for Cynical and Negative News Frames, which was published in the International Journal of Press and Politics in July 2014. Thank you.